The salami makes me think of the Lunchables of my youth.
Oh, dude, I was never a huge fan of Lunchables. I wasn't like actively against them. You know what I mean? Like I don't have like strong feelings. I just was not a Lunchable guy.
Hello and welcome to Let's Pod This. My name is Andy Moore. I'm joined, as always, by Scott Melson.
What's up, man? Glad you're back.
Thank you. Glad to be back in the upper room.
Right? We missed you here in Upper Room Studios last week. Although, many thanks to John Rourke for...
Hey, hats off to Mr. Rourke. Excellent co-host. I like his soft voice and how he asks you so many questions. It was like he was interviewing you the whole time.
Yeah. He was like, tell me more about that, Scott.
That's right. Tell me how you really feel. So that was a really great episode. You guys did great, excellent guests. I think some really great perspectives. And really, it's been 3 weeks now since I've joined you for this because we did take an accidental week off while I moved.
You moved. I was sick. It just couldn't make it happen.
No good there. All right, so in the last week, as we joked earlier, we thought it'd be a slow week, and turns out it's not. It's been a very busy week. So we're going to go through the usual litany of issues here. We've got some news stories, some legislative recap, Pruitt Watch, and then at the bottom of the episode, the last half, we've got about a 30-minute interview with State Senator Greg McCortney, who joined us by phone just a little while ago, and we'll share that with you. We visited with Senator McCortney about education funding, teacher walkout, living in a post-partisan world, and a big Facebook post that he had the other day. So, Scott, let's start by talking about what's been going on this week in the news.
Yeah, in the news this week. So we've got six stories this week instead of our usual 5. I couldn't bring it down to just 5 this week, but we've got some of the usual players here. Or the Frontier, which we've had now. I think this is our 3rd appearance of
an excellent independent news organization.
Yeah, they're making an appearance this week, leading off the news recap. So they've got a great article that looks at how several of Oklahoma's largest and most profitable companies are paying actually very little or nothing in income taxes specifically. So this is due to a provision in the corporate tax code called a net operating loss carry forward. Just saying that is about as much accounting as I know. So, Andrew, can you?
Sure. Yeah, so a net operating loss, well, there's 2 parts to this. Net operating loss is when your expenses exceed your revenue, means your bills are more than your income, and then the carry forward is when you carry that loss forward. So let's say we'll use round numbers and small ones to make this easier to understand, I think, for all of us. So let's say your business brings in $10,000 this year, but your expenses are $20,000. So that means you've got basically negative $10,000 in revenue, right? Like your expenses exceeded your revenues by $10,000. So you would pay no taxes this year because you didn't actually make any money. And you've got an extra $10,000 there to carry forward. So you could apply that to next year's tax burden as well. So next year, if you only made $8,000, you could write down all $8,000 and still have $2,000 left over to carry forward again to the next year, so you wouldn't pay taxes next year, and you would reduce your burden on the 3rd year as well. Well, what happens with large corporations that have millions or billions of dollars in revenue is that they may have a really bad year, and they tend to stack things on particular years, right? They try to hold things off, hold purchases off, buy PP&E, plant, property, and equipment, buy all that in one year, so that they kind of say, this year we're gonna spend all of our money. This is all the expenses, so that we have no income tax this year, and then we can carry that forward in the future. And it's a way for companies to avoid paying an income tax, even on years that they might actually be profitable. Otherwise, in one year they might be profitable, but because things were so bad 3 years ago, they're not paying income tax on the really good year.
Yeah, so that's exactly it. That's what this article kind of focused on, and it deals with several companies. It focuses on oil and gas, which is always a hot topic here in Oklahoma, and uses a couple of our large companies as an example. I found this interesting because as we've been talking about, education funding and teacher strikes and raises, one of the sticking points for any revenue package has been gross production tax, and one of the kind of talking points from industry has been, we're already heavily taxed, and they list things like excise taxes. They list things like income taxes as the tax burden that they have. And this article was pointing out, well, because of the downturn in oil and gas prices that really kind of hit in 2014, several of our largest companies took heavy losses. Now that they're profitable again, they're using those losses to essentially eliminate or significantly lower their tax burden now. And so I think that one of the questions raised by this article is, okay, if you're going to say that like the gross production tax has to stay at 2% or can't go above 4% because of all these other taxes that you pay, it begs the question, are you actually paying those taxes or not? And we're not here to make a policy statement about whether or not net operating loss carry forward is a good policy or bad policy. It's important to note as the article does, that Oklahoma is not unique in this. Virtually all states allow net operating loss carry forward. I think the feds do it too. Usually there's not a time limit. So this is a very, very common corporate tax and accounting practice. But I thought it was interesting.
Right. It's basically, if you have a really, really bad year, it can reduce your tax burden in other years that might be moderately good.
Right.
At some point it's going to run out. But I think the issue, the reason it is worthy of a story, is that at face value, everybody kind of expects everyone else to pay their fair share.
Right.
And we don't get these kind of carry forwards on our income taxes necessarily. So, that's a good point.
All right. Next up is our friends at News OK. So this is an article that I think is interesting, number one, but two, I love elections. Like, I love elections. I love election season. I love like the horse race. I love the politics. So anything that has to do with that is going to immediately like grab my attention. This is a piece talking about Oklahoma's 5th congressional district, which is here in the Oklahoma City metro, portions of Pottawatomie County and portions of Seminole County. Yeah. So a little bit of Shawnee and a little bit of Seminole itself. Yeah. Okay. Right. Basically, this is Congressman Steve Russell represents the Oklahoma's 5th congressional district. It has been a solidly Republican district for several decades now, I think since the mid to late 1980s. However, News OK is publishing a report this week saying that that's starting to change. This is no longer rated by national political handicappers as a solid Republican district. It's moved to the likely Republican district, which, no matter how you feel about that, I think is news, right?
Right. It's a change for sure. Like any kind of drift, and this is maybe indicative of a nationwide, I don't know if blue wave is the appropriate term for what happens here in Oklahoma, but I will say the quote that stood out to me in the article is from local pollster and political genius, I guess, Pat McFerrin. Nice guy, but he talked about Steve Russell and saying that, Congressman Russell is someone who may vote with Trump on occasion, but when he differs from him. But if my memory serves, I believe 538 Politics has a tracker on how often members of Congress in both chambers vote with the president, and I think Russell votes with him the most often of any member of Congress. Have you looked at this?
I have looked at that. I don't remember his number specifically. I think we can fact check that here while we're on the.
You keep talking. I'll look it up.
But that's why we included this. It is just interesting to me that a district that voted for the president by, I want to say 18, 19 points in the last election is now no longer solid Republican and just likely Republican. So that was the impetus for that inclusion. All right, up next, third article this week from the New York Times. This is the latest installment of Pruitt Watch. Former Attorney General of Oklahoma, Scott Pruitt, who is now the EPA Administrator. This is just a profile of EPA Administrator Pruitt and kind of talking about, what people who watch this sort of thing and kind of prognosticate what they think his future political ambitions might be and how some of his activities at EPA reflect his potential ambitions for higher office. It's a really interesting profile and deals with a prominent Oklahoman who is rumored to be considering a run for statewide office in the near future here. So that's there for you as well. Number 4, Nondoc, who I think has made an appearance in our news roundup every week since we started doing this. Wouldn't surprise me. There's a commentary this week in Nondoc that's looking at the education system here in Oklahoma. Not simply talking about, I'm talking about kind of the state of it, not really focused on funding or the teacher walkout per se, but really more looking at, are we doing education in the way that, 1, makes the most sense, and 2, is best for our kids. It's interesting. There's not specific policy proposals. It's really more kind of a theoretical, hypothetical article that, honestly asks more questions than it answers. But I think the questions it asks are pretty insightful and interesting. So be sure and check it out. Next up, I didn't know what to call this other than what the hell is happening in Chickasha. So this is
Okay, then.
This is from News OK. There has been a request for an Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation to look into allegations of grade and attendance tampering in Chickasha public schools. I wish that I could tell you more than that. That's really about all we know at this point. According to this article, last year, there were something like 5,500 grades and 18,800 individual assignment grades that were overwritten. So 5,500 course grades. So did you get an A or B or C in a course? And then almost 20,000 grades on individual assignments that were overridden in the school's grade tracking system.
But it doesn't seem to indicate who overrode those scores.
Yeah, it doesn't say. This is an article from Ben Felder at the Oklahoman. Ben has good sources. He does great work. So I think if this is all he's publishing, this is either all he knows or all he can say. But yeah, what the hell's happening in Chickasha?
Interesting.
All right, and then our last up this week is another article from Nondoc that, again, this one I couldn't cut any of these, and this is another kind of what the hell article from Nondoc that is concerning but also kind of funny. The headline is "The Oklahoma Department of Agriculture owes money to an unknown entity." So the story here is that the U.S. Treasury in November pulled back or clawed back about $835,000 of federal funding from Oklahoma. They pulled this from the Department of Agriculture to resolve a billing dispute. If you want to know more about that, you're going to have to go back and find the article on Nondoc from November. However, so what then has to happen is that state agencies that lost federal funding, because when the feds say, hey, there's a state that owes us money, they just come take it. And they take it from any agency that receives federal funds because they can. And so then, even though these funds were a billing dispute with the Oklahoma Department of Agriculture, the feds take it from anywhere they can get it. So then agencies that had lost federal funding because of this, they write letters to the Oklahoma Ag Department, and they're pissed and like, hey, we lost our federal funding because you guys messed something up.
Right. You owe us money.
You owe us money. And there are 2 accounts, one for $14,000 and one for $41,000, that are still pending because state administrators have not been able to identify the affected agency.
So it sounds like the Department of Agriculture knows that they owe the money to somebody, but those people haven't come knocking for it.
Right.
Man, I swear, I hope that it's not education or the Department of Health,
Right.
because those people need money, and they better know if they are owed some money.
Right. They. This is from Jim Reese. He's the Secretary of Agriculture. Mr. Reese says, we have a zip code and an agency number that doesn't correlate to anything Oklahoma has. It says Department 2563, so we don't have a place to pay.
So it's a clerical error.
It is.
Someone left out a digit.
Right. It's It was just funny to me that there's $55,000 at the ag department and they don't know who to give it to.
Sign me up. I'll take it.
Yeah, right, dude.
Let's fix this. We'll be happy to receive that money and put it to good use.
Sponsor the pod.
That's right.
We'll run Department of Ag ads for the rest of the rest of
I love
the decade.
Plants. Right. I love plants and agriculture and animals. Yeah. So, quick correction.
We got an update.
Okay. Yeah. So I looked on 538.com. That's all spelled out. 538.com. They've got a tracking Congress in the age of Trump, an updating tally of how often every member of the House and Senate vote with or against the president. I misspoke. Steve Russell's not one of the high. Well, it's still high. He has voted in line with Trump's position 92.8% of the time. But I was thinking of another Oklahoma congressman.
What's it, Bridenstine?
No, Russell. Not Russell. That's what we're talking about. Frank Lucas.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Congressman Frank Lucas, who has voted with Trump 98.6% of the time.
Sure.
I'm sure Bridenstine is high as well. But
Because he wants to be the spaceman.
Well, yeah, so he's been appointed to NASA, right?
Yeah, but he can't get confirmed.
So Bridenstine's slightly higher than Russell at 94.1% for Bridenstine.
All right.
According to, vote tallies, I guess. 538 reports them, but they're the ones that cast the votes. So.
Well, so that's it for Don't Miss This week, our news roundup. We will get all this up on the blog tomorrow. Like I said, it's a little bit eclectic in terms of subject matter today, but I think it's all pretty interesting, so hope you check it out.
Excellent. So let's take a quick break. And when we get back, we will jump into the legislative recap part of the pod.
Part of the pod.
Pod parts. All right, we're back for the legislative recap. So this week, not a whole lot of notable legislating occurred. This wasn't a deadline week. This was spring break, honestly, and so the House and Senate were marginally in session, and even then, poorly attended.
Yeah. So pretty much quorum call every day. I think yesterday they were in session for 8 minutes.
Yeah.
In the House, anyway.
So, some tweets, some angry things, and really it's just a lot of positioning around this education issue, right? So various plans were released, lots of kind of discussion about it, and certainly a few bills. Lots of media activity from the members of the media that I've spoken with. They're all just scrambling, trying to get as many perspectives as they can. Shout out to a friend of the pod, Scott Mitchell.
Yes.
And Mitchell Talks in News 9. You may know Scott from his segments on News 9 on Saturday and Sunday morning.
The Hot Seat on Saturdays.
And Your Vote Counts on Sunday.
If you don't watch these, you should.
Both of those air at 7:50 in the morning, thereabouts, 7:45-ish.
If you're like me, you DVR it and watch it about 11.
Nice. He also posts them on Facebook a little while later, usually about 9 o'clock, because they record on Friday, and they just post them, and I just catch them then. Although it has been funny on the times that they've given us a shout-out on there when I watched it live, and it's weird to hear your name on TV.
Yeah, no question.
So anyway, Scott Mitchell has been doing a twice daily Facebook Live broadcast from Camp's 1910 Cafe down here on 10th Street and Broadway. If you haven't already, look up Mitchell Talks on Facebook or just News 9's feed. He posts these twice daily. And I myself was on the very first one with former state representative and gubernatorial candidate Joe Dorman. Everybody knows Joe at this point. He's also the executive director of the Oklahoma Institute for Child Advocacy. So he and I talked about kind of where we're at with this this teacher walkout education funding need debacle. We need a word that describes a really big, onerous, messy situation.
My AP European history teacher always used the word kerfuffle.
Ooh, well, it is a kerfuffle. That still feels too small.
To me, there's kind of two big things that have gone on this week. So one is deciding the leadership in each house, right? So the leadership in each chamber. So leadership in the House, leadership in the Senate. They have to take all the bills that passed off the floor in the opposite chamber, review them, and decide what committee they go to. And that's not always a straightforward decision, right? It has to do with the topic of the bill. It has to do with which committee has jurisdiction over that topic. So it's not as simple as just like, hey, 1 through 10 here, 2 through 20, or 11 through 20 here, 21 through 30 here. So that's a particularly when you consider the number of bills we're talking about. Guys, we still have 850 bills alive, right? So you remember we started session with about 2,000 bills filed, about another 1,000 held over from last session. We're down to 850. The top 850 that
I feel lighter already.
right, that have made the cut. But that's 850 bills that have to be decided, what committee are they assigned to. So that's one thing that's going on all day, every day this week at the Capitol. The other thing, though, there is lots, and we're going to get into this a little bit more in one of our later segments, but there's lots of behind-the-scenes activity, conversations, not a whole lot of movement yet about a possible teacher pay package. Word on the street is that there will be votes on revenue in the House next week. We don't know what package it's going to be. We don't know if it's going to be enough to placate, the teachers unions, the Union of Public Employees, the support staff, these groups that are pledging to walk off the job on April 2nd. No idea if it's going to be enough to kind of meet what they're asking for. And even if it's enough to meet what they're asking for, we have no idea whether it's going to pass. So there's a lot of open questions, but I can tell you there are some major discussions between groups that you wouldn't necessarily expect to be allies happening this week, trying to find a solution to this issue.
I propose a 5-cent tax on plastic straws.
Okay. That'll hit my wife hard.
She's a big straw consumer.
She's a pretty solid straw consumer.
It is regressive tax, I understand, but just take the lid off and sip your drink like anyone else.
That's why I said no one needs a straw, right?
It's not necessary.
Right.
Except for like a slushy.
Yeah.
Because that's like isolanche on your face. It's just no good.
Right. So we did have a couple things that I think are notable. House and Senate JCAB, the joint committees on appropriations and budget. Each chamber's JCAB committee met today. They passed bills that cap zero emission tax credits. So for zero emissions facilities, most commonly wind in Oklahoma, this caps the credits that they're allowed to claim every year at $35 million. They have been claiming, I think, between 85 and 90 million each year. This is a big deal, one, because it's a substantial tax increase on the wind industry. Not saying it's good, not saying it's bad, just saying that's what it is. However, several of the members of the Senate JCAB committee were debating against this today. I think it was past 25-12, I believe. A lot of the debate against this was, one, we have agreements. The state of Oklahoma has agreements with these companies about what the caps on the credits are going to be, and we're kind of going back in the middle, right? We're kind of saying, hey, we know we said that you're going to have these credits for this long, but we need the money, so we're changing our mind. And concerns from some legislators are, one, what does that do for the next governor, for the next lieutenant governor, leadership of the state that are trying to recruit companies to come invest in Oklahoma and using tax incentives to do that? If you're the leader, if you're the CEO of a company looking to make an investment, do you ask the question, well, hey, you made these promises to wind, and when you needed the money, you took it back. So are you going to do that to me? Two, these agreements are in writing. And so there's concern by some senators that this opens the state up to litigation. Not a lawyer, can't give a legal opinion, so I don't know how
but you
accurate.
Can, it just doesn't matter.
Well, right, that's true. So I don't know how accurate that is, but those were the concerns that were brought up today. So that's really it in terms of kind of official legislative activity that happened this week. But that leaves us some extra time here to highlight a bill that I think you wanted to talk about, Andy. I know this is an issue about which you're passionate, that's near and dear to your heart because of the work that you do and have done for several years now. This is Senate Bill 1105, SB 1105. This is a bill on HIV education that has passed out of the Senate and I think has good prospects to pass in the House.
One would hope, yeah. So Senate Bill 1105 has broad bipartisan support. It was authored by Senator A.J. Griffin and Anastasia Pittman in the Senate, and it is co-authored by Representative Marcus McIntyre and Emily Virgin in the House. You will note that there are two people in each chamber from each party. So that's bipartisan, bicameral support.
Is that a coincidence?
I hope not. So I in my day job, I work in the HIV community here in Oklahoma, and have done that for almost 10 years now, and I also serve on the board of directors for the Oklahoma AIDS Care Fund, a wonderful organization that provides some much needed financial support to the HIV community, including directly to some individuals who are living with HIV and AIDS. So this bill would update the language that in the health mandate. So there's been a health mandate on the books for a long time that requires that all students in Oklahoma receive some education about HIV and AIDS at least twice between 6th grade and 12th grade, right? So basically once in middle school, once in high school. And it's like 45 minutes each time. It's not a lot. Basically in your health class at some point, once between 6th and 8th, again between 9th and 12th. But the existing law hasn't been updated since 1987. A few things.
That's remarkable. Just kind of I'm going to put my doctor hat on here for a second. I mean, what we know about HIV now versus what we knew about HIV in 1987, I mean, it's two different universes, right? Like
it really is.
What we understand about the virus, what we understand about what it does, what we understand about how to treat it, what we understand about how it's transmitted. I mean, this is.
Yeah. So the first cases of HIV reported in the United States, including Oklahoma, were in 1981. 1987, when the first education mandate, the existing education mandate, was passed, is the same year that AZT was approved, which was the very first medication to treat HIV. We're now on the third, fourth, and arguably the fifth generation of treatment for HIV, meaning things have improved a whole heck of a lot since then. No one uses AZT anymore. Yeah. And so in the original bill, the existing language only uses the term AIDS, does not use the term HIV at all, which is a big shift. Even the federal government, as slow as they move, changed their official website from AIDS.gov to HIV.gov this year.
And it's not just a semantic difference. I mean, that's
basically
a big difference, clinically. I mean, that's not just words.
Right. And so we ran a similar bill last year trying to get parts of it updated, and it failed because the original bill, the existing bill, or the existing statute is all the language is about AIDS and homosexual activity, which is just not the most accurate nor politically correct terminology to discuss risk factors and people who may be at risk, because it's a lot more than just that.
Right.
But to be fair, in 1987, that's kind of the way the world worked, right? So now it's a much different. And so this year we're really pushing complete replacement. Just we kind of recognize, you know what, this whole bill sucks. This whole statute sucks. We need to just rewrite it entirely. And so we're proposing striking the whole thing and replacing it with new, updated, current language that reflects the state of the HIV epidemic today and the education that students need today, so that we can bring an end to this epidemic in Oklahoma. We got a really good shot. Like I say this every chance I get, we're not that far away. And education is the key to making this happen.
Huge.
And
I'll tell you, I read the bill. I read the bill cover to cover.
It's only 4 pages. It's not a big one.
I mean, it's 4 pages of legislative language, dude.
Yeah, but it's like almost bullet points.
Let's not minimize what a work I did here.
You're a physician. I don't hear your complaints. Dr. Melson.
It's a great bill. If you guys, it's SB 1105. If you got a minute this week, if you're calling your state senator, calling your state rep to talk about, education funding, teacher pay, whatever, throw in a plug for SB 1105 and say you hope they support it.
We did. This past Tuesday was HIV Advocacy Day at the Capitol. This is only the second advocacy day we've had for HIV at the Capitol ever. Last year was the first one. Last year didn't go so well because, if you remember the news stories, some Capitol staffer sent out an email about cross-dressers being in the Capitol.
Yes, I remember that.
Which is unfortunate because it just referred to teenagers whom this staffer saw, and I guess they assumed they were people wearing clothing of a different gender, although all the kids had on jeans and t-shirts, so I don't really know what constitutes cross-dressing. Anyway, it was super offensive, and it got out on Twitter while we were at the Capitol, and it sucked for those teens. Yeah. I mean, I had stood there and I had to kind of look at some people in the eye and be like, I'm sorry that you came to the Capitol and were offended. That's not
And the
how
people
this is supposed to go.
and the people that are supposed to represent you are jackholes. Like that's
Well, and it wasn't intentional. I think this staffer messed up and faced whatever consequences were associated with that. This year it went much more smoothly. We had a really great breakfast. We had a guest speaker, Paige Rawls, who's a nationally known speaker. She was infected from birth with HIV, and it was transmitted mother to child, and so she grew up facing some really severe bullying. And
Yeah.
in light of what happened last year, was a really great speaker, and she had some really helpful, kind, instructive words for our group. And then we all went to the Capitol and visited offices, and I still have a few packets left to deliver.
that's just awesome, man. That's just awesome.
Thanks.
So, well, I think that will wrap us up for legislative recap. We will be right back. Really hope you guys stay with us for the rest of the pod. Got two, I think, exciting discussions for you. First up, we've got an interview with Senator Greg McCortney, state senator from Ada, who has some thoughts about a Facebook post that kind of went viral from his account earlier this week. So we're going to talk with Senator McCortney, and then as a kind of a follow-up to that discussion, we'll be back with kind of an in-depth look at some of the proposals for teacher pay and public employee pay, as well as support staff funding that have come out in the last week. We'll be right back.
My name's Greg McCortney. I'm the state senator for District 13, which is Ada is the largest city, but Ada, Pauls Valley, Holdenville, and many, many points in between.
That's a beautiful part of the state. I have some good friends down in Ada, Jim and Nikki Knight. Jim is the pastor for the Ada Church of the Nazarene. He was my college pastor for many years and still is a good friend to this day. So adaoknaz.com is their new website. I just saw it the other day that they posted it.
Huh.
They,
Ada is the center of the universe, is what my wife has come to believe.
It really is a cool town.
Yeah, and East Central is down there. Beautiful campus at East Central. I haven't been there in a few years. When I was a kid, junior high and high school, we'd have competitions at East Central for, whether it was, I think like when I was younger, like Odyssey of the Mind, which is like a kind of engineering kind of contest because I was the super cool kid.
Right. Well, and now you've dated yourself because it was Olympics of the Mind when I was a kid. But then they made them quit using Olympics. So you are younger than me. But I was also super cool.
Well, Senator, we wanted to visit with you because we saw your Facebook post the other day where we kind of liked that you broke down kind of your view of, I guess, the four kind of main ideological, political leaning kind of on the spectrum groups. So as a fan of psychology, a student of psychology, I'd like the 4-point Likert scale rather than a 5-point, because with a 5-point scale, everyone picks the middle. And so you had four points. You had from, we'll say on the far left, the all-in education union supporter, who you kind of described as ideological Democrats, then the strong education supporter, or the included most pragmatic Democrats, and then moving to the right, some more the pragmatic Republican, and finally on the far right, the ideological conservative. So kind of the far end on both sides, and then something a little closer to the middle, and maybe no group right in the middle, right? Arguably everyone kind of leans one way or the other.
Yeah, everybody's got a side somewhere.
Right, at least on certain issues. So we're curious, maybe what led to you deciding to write this post in the first place?
Really, I wrote the post because I was getting more emails, text messages, Facebook messages, just more contacts than I could manage. And they come from all over the spectrum. I mean, you have, like you said, kind of the all-in, we need $1.4 billion and not a penny less for education. You get those people. And at the same time, I'm getting messages from people saying, you better not ever raise a tax, and teachers are paid enough. We already spend way too much money on education. And so for me, this whole thing started as an attempt to find something that I could send to all of those people, because there was no way I could respond personally to all of them. And so it ended up being a multi-page letter that I ended up writing, just trying to tell people what I see, and hopefully help people kind of understand that just because you see the world from one angle, your next door neighbor probably does not agree with you.
Right. And I think one of our kind of core tenets with Let's Fix This is helping people remember that there are at least two sides to every issue, and it's important to have that dialogue with people, even those with whom you may not see eye to eye, because you might learn something, or at least gives you a more dynamic and a more diverse understanding of all these complex issues.
Yeah, I particularly love that you use social media, a social media venue, as the opportunity to make this point, because I think a lot of the, whether you want to call it polarization, divide, kind of whatever words you want to use, I think social media, which could be and should be a way for us to connect with people who disagree with us, really becomes a way for us to further insulate ourselves, right? Like, most of the things that show up on your feed are going to be things that you agree with, because those are the people that you follow, and those are the things that you like, and those are the pages you click on. So I love that you took kind of social media and used it as a venue to lay out that there's at least 4 different sides to this issue, and there's probably more than that.
And yeah, there are a whole lot more than that. Those 4 categories, and I said in the post, I mean, they're incredibly broad, and most people fall into multiple categories. I can find myself in categories 2, 3, and 4, given, depending on kind of the into, or it's such a complex issue. I mean, just speaking about education, that it's hard to pin anyone into any one group most of the time.
Sure. And in your post, you did kind of highlight that groups 2 and 3, with the pragmatic Democrats and the pragmatic Republicans, that there's a lot of overlap in those groups, and that you get a lot of messaging that from maybe people who are registered one way or the other, but it kind of comes from both groups.
Absolutely. I get a whole lot of kind of what you were saying about social media a minute ago, that everyone kind of has their world set up where they get their view reinforced over and over again. That definitely happens in the outreach that I get. I get a whole lot from the extremes, and the people in the middle are a little bit quieter, but they make up for it in just the sheer fact that most people are somewhere in the middle. And it's not a Democrat-Republican thing. It truly is people, in my mind, who understand that we've got a huge problem in front of us, and the solution is going to be A, hard to find, but B, it's going to have to be complex, and it's going to have to be a compromise, and they're willing to do that, and they want to find that. And I think that's the majority of people, at least the people that I represent.
Do you think that the parties, and maybe a better way to say this is, do you think that voters are moving more towards the extremes or more towards the middle?
I don't know. I think that the system that we have now, the primary system in Oklahoma, and really in the United States, with so many districts that are going to be either Democrat or Republican, the fact that your hardest election is in your primary makes the people running run to the fringes,
right?
And never really need to get back to the center. And so I think it's the system is producing some of these issues more than I still believe, and I could be wrong, that the average Oklahoman is more moderate than we give them credit for.
That's probably true.
I think you're 100% right, actually, on that.
We have a friend that jokes about being a aggressively moderate voter, and I think she gets a lot of flack for that because the folks on the edges have a hard time imagining that anyone could be in the middle and might vote with both parties on different issues.
Yeah, I mean, that's and that was, I think, a little bit of what I was trying to say in the post is that the people who are 1 and the people who are in group 4, I think that they truly believe that there are very few people in the middle because they can't wrap their mind around the fact that someone is somewhere in the middle. That's just not how they see the world, and so they can't imagine someone else seeing the world with that moderate, we can do it multiple ways and still be okay kind of view.
Right.
So, Senator, kind of going back to something that you mentioned a minute ago, that like whatever solution we find to this problem, and just in case anybody that's listening to us is tuning in for the first time, we're specifically talking about the fact that there's 70 school districts across the state that have said, hey, in 2 weeks, if there's not been a teacher pay raise of some kind, our teachers are going to walk off the job, and we're supporting them. And the teachers have asked for a raise. They've asked for a raise for public employees. They've asked for a raise for school support staff, and some restoration of other funding cuts related to education and healthcare that have taken place not just in the past couple of years, but really over at least the last decade, maybe more. So that's kind of, I guess, the problem that we're dealing with. And you said that whatever solution we find to this is going to be complicated and it's going to be difficult to reach. And I wondered if you could maybe just talk a little bit more about why you feel like it needs to be complicated, or like how the system's going to force it to be complicated, and why you feel like the solutions are going to be difficult to find. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And first, I want to make sure and frame the problem. The problem is not that we're about to have a teacher walkout. We're about to have a teacher walkout because we don't fund education as well as we should. And so I want to make sure that that the problem is a poor education system. It is not a teacher walkout. The teacher walkout's a symptom that hopefully will force us to. I mean, it's kind of like at some point you get so sick you have to go to the doctor no matter how stubborn you are, and hopefully that's where we are as a state right now, that we've finally gotten sick enough that we're going to go to the doctor and we're going to get this fixed.
Absolutely. You're right. That is a much better and more accurate framing of the problem for sure. So.
I think OEA could benefit from that talking point.
Yeah, that's a great. That's a much better framing of the problem. So thank you for that.
Right, and so on the complex side, it goes back to. I mean, I'm a former preacher, so I could go for an hour on this one point probably, but it's complex for multiple reasons, but the biggest reason is the fact that in Oklahoma you have to have 75 votes to raise a tax, and there is not a supermajority in the House of Representatives, which means if we're going to fix this problem, we have to have a solution that Democrats and Republicans are going to agree on. And that is almost impossible. And I am 43 years old. I was 17, so I was not old enough to vote when we changed the system so that you have to have 75% of the legislature to raise a tax. And since then, we have not ever done it. And so we as a state made it very, very difficult to raise taxes. And I always love to point out that, that is not Republican and Democrat. That is, for the first 15 years, Democrats couldn't raise taxes. for the last 10, Republicans couldn't raise taxes. It's just almost impossible to do. And I said in the Facebook post, and I stole this from Senator Lonnie Paxton, but I used to be a pastor. And for those of you who attend church, if you had to, on one day, get your church together and you had to agree to replace the carpet in your sanctuary, you had to agree on what color your carpet's going to be, how thick your carpet's going to be, how much your carpet is going to cost, and how you're going to pay for it. And 75% of the members of your congregation have to agree on that day to that carpet purchase. You will never, ever, ever get new carpet in your sanctuary. It will not happen.
At the church that I grew up in, I don't think we could have gotten 75% of us to agree that we should replace the carpet. But we couldn't agree on carpet. It would have been carpet or wood or stone, or even just getting to carpet would have been impossible.
Right, and that was, and going back to the categories that I set out, and one of the points that you kind of make through those is that, I think 10% of your church is going to want hardwood or tile, and then 15% of your church is going to say that the carpet does not need to be replaced. And so you can't even you can get exactly 75% at that point to agree that you need carpet. That's as far as you can even agree at a 75% level. And then you have to actually get into the details. And at that point, it's absolutely impossible.
That's a really great analogy. And I think, aside from the fact that I think the rest of us feel like carpetbaggers now, the fact that there's probably 75% of the legislature that definitely agrees that we need more education funding and that teacher pay is too low. And I think maybe teacher pay has been the piece that gets the most press in all of this. But in your opinion, Senator, what is another very important piece of this request that hasn't been talked about enough in the conversation or in the media?
For me, and the part that I will get most passionate about is the need for more teachers. That you go to school after school after school that have 30 kids in a classroom. You look at a kindergarten classroom with 28 kids. You give me a room with 5 kindergartners, and I will probably go crazy. And so, to me, it not only and those problems probably you have to fix them both at the same time. I think if you don't fix teacher pay, you're not going to be able to find enough teachers to have smaller classes. But at the same time, we're going to have to find the money to hire more teachers along with paying teachers better. Because kids just, 30 second graders, 32 second graders in a classroom, that's never going to produce the quality of education that I think we want for our kids.
That's right. I have 2 children. They're 4 and 6, and my son is in kindergarten this year. My daughter's in pre-K, and I have started really pressing myself to think about what education in Oklahoma is going to look like in 5 years or 10 years as my kids move through elementary school into high school, and it has resonated with me in a very different and very terrifying way about if these cuts continue. And we've all seen the pictures of textbooks and lack of supplies that have been going around lately, and what they have to look forward to through the rest of their schooling if we don't make a 180-degree turn and make some very big changes. So I think as a parent of children entering the school system, I appreciate your hard work and trying to get us there.
I appreciate that, and I have 3 of my own. I've got a freshman, a 7th grader, and a 6th grader in Ada Public Schools, and so I have seen some of this up close and personal, and it's hard to it's just hard to imagine really just the problems that we create by not educating an entire generation of kids the way that we should. Our future workforce is not coming out of school, in my mind, with the education that I would like for them to have, for sure.
That's right.
Well, Senator, what's kind of your gut feeling? It's, we've got, I think, 11 days until the teachers have said this is kind of the deadline that we're putting out there. Do you think we'll get something done in the next 11 days, or do you think that the walkout is inevitable at this point?
I will give about a 5% chance that the walkout could be avoided. And that's probably the eternal optimist in me. I'm a Chicago Cubs fan, so I'm used to, I saw one miracle come true finally, and so I can always root for the next one. But no, I think that the odds are very much in favor of the teacher walkout happening, and I would think that it will not be very short.
The last one lasted 4 days.
Yeah, 4 days was in 90, I think.
Yeah.
West Virginia just went for 9, I think. So.
No, I hope that I'm wrong. I mean, I very, very much hope that I'm wrong, but to get the size of solution this year that the teachers want, it's going to have to be a bipartisan solution, and I just don't see a path to a bipartisan solution in the House of Representatives.
That divide between the two chambers has been really, so, I don't know, interesting, maybe heartbreaking to watch this year. It was funny because when session started last year, it was, let's fix this. We're still a very young organization. Really, it was our first full session to be involved. And at the beginning, everyone's like, oh, the Senate's going to be where all the problems are. And it quickly became clear that was not the case. Like, everything kind of broke down over on the House side.
Yeah, we're starting to have a little man complex over in the Senate because you guys always just pay attention to the House. That's where the fireworks are. We're on the other side of the building, just getting things done.
We're here. There's a quote that I've always found fascinating, or I shouldn't say it's a quote. It's a story, I guess. I only know it from the West Wing. I've heard that it's attributed to maybe Senator Edward Kennedy, or one of the kind of old stalwarts of the Senate. But a young congressman comes to Washington for the first time, and he's talking with some of the leadership in the House of Representatives, and he says, some of the guys from the other side asked me if I want to go get drinks, but I said I can't go get drinks with the enemy. And his leadership said, "Oh, son, they're not the enemy. They're the opposition. The enemies of the Senate."
But I will admit that there is some of that in the state capitol too. That we like to spar with the other party in our chamber, but we like to try to punk and pull something over on the other on the people on the other side of the building, and that's probably not helpful whatsoever in getting things done. But that is apparently a very, very long-held tradition.
So our last question is something we ask pretty much all of our guests, and that's, how can we help? What's the best way for regular folks at home to get involved and make a difference here?
Number one, contact your legislator. Blanket emails don't help, especially when we're at a time like this. I mean, our email boxes are filling up faster than we can empty them at this point. And so if you see an email with every one of the 149 elected members listed on it, then it's probably not going to be one that I read every word and hang on every thought. And then you get more flies with honey. I really cannot overemphasize this point, with the there'll be a Capitol full of angry people, and I don't think that's going to help anything at all. And I really have a great fear that it's going to make things worse. And that goes back to the 75 vote issue that, I mean, we, in the House, which we love to make fun of and love to point fingers at, they have multiple times had over 70% of the people in that body voting to fix this problem. And if thousands of people show up and yell and cuss and scream at those 70 people that were willing to be a part of the solution, I have a great fear that you lose some of those supporters. Mm-hmm. And we're going to make this problem worse. And so a civil conversation, a civil email with your representative is by far, in times like this, the best way to move forward.
I appreciate that. I think those are both things that we try to instill in people, that reaching out to your representatives, your senators, is the most important thing, and to just be cool, man. Like, I know I've heard that POE, the other education group, has reserved the rotundas on like the 2nd through the 4th floor for April 2nd. So they'll have their tables there. I'm sure OEA will be there as well, but they won't be able to have any tables because the other group already reserved the space, so they're just going to spill into the hallways, and I'm afraid it's going to be a noisy day when nothing gets done.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. That whole thing is going to be quite the adventure for sure. And I did not know that POE has snagged the space in the rotunda. That will, I think again that's a great example of. I mean, you have 2 education groups here in the state who cannot agree with each other, and in large part at this moment are fighting with each other over what the solution to the education problem should be. And that sure does not doesn't help anyone at this point, but that's definitely where we are.
It really doesn't. On a related note, next Wednesday, we will be there for our first Let's Fix This Capitol Day of the year. We'll be down in the Blue Room, kind of in the corner by ourselves, helping people understand how to have a civil conversation. If you are available at 9 o'clock in the morning, you'd like to stop by, we'd love to say hello, and I'm happy to let you have the microphone and say a few words to the crowd. I think Leslie Osborne's going to join us.
That'd be great. Maybe Jason Dunnington and I can come down together and show people what bipartisanship looks like.
That's right, and bicameral leadership there.
There you go.
So
the House and the Senate, Democrats and Republicans, all together.
One big happy family.
That's right.
Hey, Senator, we really appreciate your time sitting down with us. Really appreciate your thoughts, and really, most of all, appreciate the fact that you're, that you're there at the Capitol. You're doing the work. You're trying to be, I think, a facilitator of a solution, and not part of the problem. And I think that says a lot. And we just really appreciate you coming on and letting us ask you some questions today.
I'm happy to do it, and I told Andy this before, but what Let's Fix This is doing. I mean, the work you're doing, the attitude you bring to it is incredibly impressive to me, and just for you guys and the board of directors and everybody who's put their heart and soul into this project, I give you a big round of applause. Because I know you guys all have other things that you need to be doing with your life, but you're putting a lot into this, and that's incredibly impressive to me. So I wanted to say thank you for what y'all are doing.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that. We do. Senator, have a good afternoon.
Thank you very much. Good talking to you guys.
Okay, we're back. A big thanks to Senator McCortney for joining us for that phone call. And now we're on to our last segment of the day. We're going to discuss all the different teacher pay raise packages, but it's way more than teacher pay raises, right? Like, that's the part that gets the press, which is why I asked the good senator that question. So far we've got really 4 plans so far. However, we did see on Twitter as we started recording this that OEA plans to release their plan tomorrow, I guess on Friday, which will probably likely be about the time that this podcast gets out there too. So
Yeah.
as soon as we release this, it'll be out of date. It's just like an iPhone.
No, right. I know. I was like, why couldn't OEA do this today? So I can throw them in our analysis here.
Well, so Scott, I see that you've got a very handy and attractive spreadsheet, including links to the plans themselves. Will we be making this spreadsheet publicly available on our website?
Yeah. So some version of this is going to be available. My hope is that we're going to have actually kind of this translated into like an infographic that's maybe a little bit. I mean, I love my spreadsheets, and I can certainly link to this one. This is maybe a little dense. But
you've got it well organized, and I think it's helpful. And we did some color coding, but I think it's helpful so people can compare line to line.
Sure.
Of what's included, how much. I see you've got teacher pay raise. Is it included? Yes or no? If so, how much? What the cost is? If there's a funding mechanism for it, you've got it broken down by the demands, by the funding sources, year 1, year 2. This is really well laid out.
I was nerding out hardcore when I was making this.
I appreciate that. I need to send you. I still have a spreadsheet where I started comparing all the different budget plans. Step Up, the SOS plan, the Restore Oklahoma, all those things. It looks similar to this. So
that makes me happy.
We're of two minds.
That makes me happy.
Similar minds.
Well, so I put this together, and there's a couple of ways to look at this, and I just there've been so many proposals, there's so much talk, and as I've been kind of following what's come out, one thing that I've been struck by is every single plan that has been made public. One of my kind of first thoughts has been, okay, I see what you're saying. That seems reasonable, but that doesn't address what they're asking for. So I wondered what if we could kind of lay out things and look side by side, which one of the plans that have been made public, comes closest to addressing what teachers and public employees are asking for, and kind of to what degree does it do that? And I think that this is instructive as well because, we asked Senator McCortney in the interview, he made the point that this is whatever solution we come up with is going to have to be complicated. It's going to have to be a compromise, and it's going to be difficult to find. And I think that this chart really lays out why that is. So we'll kind of dive in here. So the first part is understanding what exactly what's the ask. So this is what teachers and public employees have come out and said, if we don't get this, we're walking off the job. And it's broken down by year. So the plan, if you will, the ask, I can't think of a better word. I hate to use the word demand, that the teachers are making is a series of funding increases, both for the classroom, raises for teachers, and then raises for support staff and raises for public employees, phased in over the course of 3 years. So in the first year, the teachers are asking for a $6,000 pay raise for teachers, a $2,500 raise for support personnel, a restoration of public education funding cuts that have taken place over the last several years, a $2,500 raise for public employees, and then funding for healthcare that's been cut. That all comes out to $812 million. That's an $812 million funding need in year 1. To answer that, I chose 3 plans. There have been more that have come out, but I picked 3 that seem kind of representative of some of the different camps in this debate. So the first one is the 60 by 6 plan. This is a plan we referenced last week on the pod that came out literally as Joe and I were recording.
This Speaker McCall's press conference.
Speaker McCall, Representative Rogers, as well as the Public Educators Association, I think, right? Isn't that the other teachers union? Yeah. OEA, Oklahoma Education Association is...
Isn't this Public Association of We should probably edit this part out.
It's...
Click on did you click the link there? P-O-E...
Yeah, it's Professional Oklahoma Educators. Okay. All right, so let's back up. So the first one, this is the 60 by 6 plan. This is the plan that Joe and I referenced on the pod last week. It came out literally as we were recording.
Speaker McCall's announcement.
Right. This was Speaker McCall, Representative Rogers, in conjunction with the Professional Oklahoma Educators. So this is a plan that really only addresses one issue of the demands. So this is a plan for teacher pay raise, full stop. Does nothing to address the raise for support personnel, education funding, raises for public employees, or funding for healthcare. And in the first year of the plan, it really doesn't address the teacher pay raise in a way that I think that the OEA came out and they said their response to this plan was this is not a serious offer. It's a 6-year plan, and if you look at it in the entirety of the 6 years, it's actually not a bad proposal in terms of how we should perhaps increase salaries for teachers. They call it 60 by 6 because the goal is at the end of this 6 years, a teacher who has worked in Oklahoma City Public School or in Oklahoma Public Schools for 25 years will be making $60,000 a year, which is substantial.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. That would make us the highest in the region. It would raise salaries for first-year teachers by about $10,500 over 6 years. So this is a big, serious, significant raise for teachers. However, as I said, it does nothing to address the other issues that have come up. The other big problem with this is there's no funding mechanism attached to it, right? It's great to say that we're going to pass legislation that raises salaries for teachers in this dramatic way for the next 6 years, but if you don't fund it, that becomes meaningless. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So that's one of the big issues with 60 by 6 is that, or there's really two issues with it. It doesn't address all the demands, and there's no funding source. So I think that's why, kind of the reaction to this was this can't be taken seriously.
I don't think so. And from what we've heard from lawmakers, they're not taking it seriously either. I mean, we saw legislators right away being like, well, how are you going to pay for this? Like, this isn't a real plan.
Right.
And I was just irritated. This is a personal note, but like, it's a really fancy graphic and signs. And I was like, somebody spent money on these signs. And you don't even have a funding source.
Right.
Come on, like.
And the thing that you're right on that, but one of the things that's most frustrating about it to me is like when you look at when you break down the pay scale and look at the actual raises that they're proposing, it's not bad.
No, right.
Like it's actually if you just look at teacher raises, it's maybe one of the best proposals out there. But it doesn't address 80% of the stuff they're asking for.
Yeah, but I mean, somebody can come out there the next week and be like, listen, we're going to do a $5,000 raise every year for the next 4 years, and that's $20,000, and we're going to have the highest paid teachers and the most motivated workforce in the country.
Right.
This is our plan. It's the be best plan.
Right.
And someone's going to be like, oh, that sounds tremendous. Yes, we want that. How are we going to pay for it? I mean, hell if I know. We're going to raise taxes on straws. And we just hope that people use a lot of straws.
Right, exactly. It's a great example of a plan that stops about 20% of the way in. Right, it's like they got 20% of the way, and they're like, yeah, this should be good.
This is me with every yard work program or project on Saturday. I'm like, here's what I'm gonna do: plant 11 trees and build a big trough. Yeah. And then I start digging a hole, and I'm like, I'm way in over my head.
Yeah. So, moving on. Next is a plan, and this is a plan that came out on Wednesday. This is a proposal by Senator Bergstrom. Senator Bergstrom is a Republican state senator from Adair, Oklahoma, and he released this through his press office on Wednesday night. Tuesday night. There we go. So, how does he stack up against what the teachers and public employees are asking for? They're asking for a $6,000 pay raise in the first year. Representative Bergstrom gives them $2,000. They're asking for a $2,500 raise for support personnel. That's a $1,667,000 raise. They ask for $75 million in education funding. He gives them $75 million in education funding. They ask for a $2,500 raise for public employees. He gives them a $1,000 raise for public employees. He does not include any funding for healthcare. And his total price tag for year one comes out to $266 million. All right. Now, it may sound like there's a lot, to be desired here with the plan that he's put forward. But you know what? He's got a plan that costs $266 million, and he has $272 million of revenue delineated to pay for it.
That's some cushion there.
So he wants to pay for this with repeal of the capital gains exemption. This is Senate Bill 11 Senate Bill 1086 that passed off the Senate floor last week is going to the House. He's estimating to get $50 million from that in year one. He's advocating for the expansion of gaming to include ball and dice, and that's $23 million. He is factoring in capping the zero emissions tax credits that we talked about. I believe he wants to cap them at $25 million, not the $35 million that passed out of JCAB committees today. He's estimating $80 million from that, and he's estimating that the state will save $84 million a year from the Medicaid work requirement that has passed in the legislature last week and will be heard again next week. And then he also wants to end the luxury tax exemption. So right now there's a tax exemption for certain luxury items. He wants to get rid of that and estimates that will save $35 million. So you add all that up, that's $272 million. The reason that he chose those 5 things is because those are all things that both chambers can do with 51%.
Interesting.
So Senator Bergstrom is coming out and saying, look, I know this isn't everything, but it's about, it's 30% of the raise for teachers that they've asked for, and it's about 30% of the raise for public employees. It's about half the raise for support personnel, and it's all the education funding. And here's how you can pay for all of it without that 75% supermajority.
That's not a bad deal. I mean, it could be definitely, if nothing else, this could serve as the backbone for a bigger plan, right?
Right.
Because I think, I'm going to go out on a limb and say this, that if we happen to only get these things, these 51 things that could be passed by a single party in both chambers, if they could get these, then that gets us part of the way there.
Right.
It's not enough.
Right.
But it's something.
But it's not zero.
It's not zero.
It's not zero.
And it's not distasteful, I think, to either party.
Right. For the most part. I think, Democrats obviously I think are going to have issues with the Medicaid work requirement.
Is that part of it?
Yeah, that's 84.
Well, that sucks.
That's $84 million. So that's, but it's there and it's already passed, and I think, if it's, I don't know that it's going to be heard on the opposite chamber. If it's heard, I think it passes. But
are we still going to do an episode about how to apply for Medicaid and one of our quick fixes?
Yes.
I had to help someone the other day apply for Medicaid. It made me think about it.
Yes. The other thing, so continuing kind of on with Senator Bergstrom, one of the things that I like about Senator Bergstrom's plan that's different than the 60 by 6 plan, he gives a lot of detail about year 2. So in year 2, the teachers and public employees are asking for another $2,000 pay raise for teachers, a $1,250 raise for support personnel, restoration of education funding, $75 million, $2,500 raise for public employees, and then another $21 million in funding for healthcare. So in year 2, that's $321.5 million in new spending. Senator Bergstrom has a $2,000 pay raise for teachers in year 2, so 100% of the ask for teachers in year 2. A $1,667 raise for support personnel in year 2, so actually over what they've asked for, at a tune of $40 million. Another $75 million for education funding, and another $1,000 for support personnel for public employees. So that's right there. That's $266 million in new spending in year 2 from Senator Bergstrom. Now, this is where it gets a little bit tricky. He has outlined how to pay for this. He's got $400 million in new revenue in year 2. It's from a $1 a pack tax on tobacco that he estimates would raise $170 million. And this is maybe the most newsworthy thing of the whole plan. It's a 5% gross production tax.
Whoa.
Which has never been on the table. Right? This is
not on the table for actual consideration, but certainly a number that's been asked for before.
Right. So 5% GPT. This is noticeable because this has been what Democrats in both chambers, but particularly the House, have essentially said, you want to get us on board for a deal. It's a deal that's got to include a 5% GPT. And Senator Bergstrom is putting it on the table here in year 2 as a way to fund it. Additionally, he's got $266 million of spending. He has $400 million in new revenue. You'll note that that's a difference of $134 million. So, in year 3 of the ask, the teachers and public employees ask for another $2,000 raise for teachers, bringing the total to 10, a $1,250 raise for support personnel, $50 million of education funding, and a $2,500 raise for public employees for a total spending of $275.5 million. Senator Bergstrom gives them 100% on the raise for teachers, 1667 on the raise for support personnel, $75 million in education funding, and a $500 raise for public employees to the tune of $249 million. And basically says we're going to pay for this. We're going to pay for this with the 134 that's left over
Right.
from year 2, from gross production and tobacco.
Interesting. It's not terrible, but I mean, a $500 raise for almost everyone is paltry at best.
It is, but remember, that's $500 on top of $1,000 they've gotten each year,
True.
the 2 years before. So it's a total of $2,500.
I'm just saying, $500 a year is $42 a month before taxes.
You're not getting into disagreement from me, but
I just think that doesn't constitute a raise, but that's me.
and I think that's a completely valid point. And I'm not sitting here saying that Senator Bergstrom's plan is the one that like I would be voting for if I was at the Capitol. But the things I want to highlight about this are, one, he addresses every issue that they've asked for, right? Like he addresses every issue that
That's
they've
true.
asked for,
That's a good
right?
point,
Like, other than restoration of funding for healthcare, which is not like that's not a small thing, okay? But in terms of a pay raise for teachers, a raise for support personnel, restoration of education funding, and raise for public employees, he addresses all of those things. Public employees in his plan only get a total of $2,500. They're asking for $7,500. Teachers in his plan only get a total of $6,000. They're asking for $10,000. Support personnel and education funding get everything that they're asking for. And not only has he offered something in every area, he's offered a way to pay for it, right? So whether you think this is a good deal, whether you think it's a bad deal, whether you think it's dead on arrival, I think that it's commendable that this is somebody who's willing to put his name on a plan. Like, this is what we ask legislators to do, right?
Right, yeah.
Like, he's coming out and saying, hey, you know what? Everybody wants ideas. Here's my idea.
Well, yeah, let's put them all out there, and that's not going to hurt anything.
So, I think that I personally, speaking for myself, I think that we can and should do better, but I want to give props to the senator for at least putting something out there. All right.
Yeah.
Shall we continue?
Yes.
All right. Last up, so I called this the backroom deal, and this is the backroom deal because this is a deal that's been published. It's out there. Nobody's officially taken responsibility for it. There's been some new reporting today that, I think this is a plan that honestly is probably sponsored by Representative McBride, Mark McBride. I think he's kind of he's the driving force behind this. So this is the backroom deal. We've already gone through what teachers are asking for. The backroom deal is in year 1, a $5,000 raise for teachers for $209 million, a $2,500 raise for support personnel at $65 million, $75 million in education funding, a $2,500 raise for public employees, and $250 million in funding for healthcare. So they get 100% of the healthcare funding. This gets 100% of the healthcare funding, 100% of the raise for public employees, 100% of education funding, 100% of the raise for support personnel, and it gives the teachers $5,000 of the $6,000 that they're asking for. So the only area this falls short is in asking for a raise for teachers. Funding is in place. This plan also has a gross production tax at 5% for $200 million, $1.50 per pack tobacco tax for $250. Motor fuels tax, 3 cents a gallon for gas, 6 cents a gallon for diesel. Capital gains exemption for $120 million. Capping the itemized deductions for individual income taxes, that's $108 million. New tax on hotels and motels for $50 million. Tax on ball and dice games for $22 million. And then coming out today, there is a $1 per megawatt hour of power generated by wind farms that would be part of this as well.
It's like a GPT on wind.
GPT on wind. That altogether is going to come out to, I want to say, right at like $971 million in funding.
Hi-oh.
$971 million in funding for a new spending of $670 million. So this funds basically everything they're asking for. The only area it's kind of not hitting the mark is $5,000 for teachers instead of $6,000, and it gives you $300 to play with, $300 million to play with when it's done.
Yeah, so they could bump it up a little bit if they needed to. And also, let's be honest, raising more revenue than what you actually need means they can cut some of these things, or they could, in theory, pass them all, and then legislators could vie for that extra money for pet projects.
Right. Or they could restore some of the funds that have been cut. I mean, we already know from ONES that we're looking at 180 million deficit before we even start the fiscal year, right?
They could fund that. They could actually like give. Hey, here's a bright idea. They could give education like a lump sum to buy all those textbooks next year,
Right.
and then keep the money going at a better rate.
Right.
We could get rid of 4-day school weeks, as Senator McCortney said. We could restore. We could add teachers instead of cutting teachers, and actually have enough, because even if let's say we swapped out all the teachers now if we swapped out all the emergency certified teachers with teachers that are trained to be teachers or experienced teachers, we'll say it that way, we still need more,
Right.
Because we've lost a bunch, we've consolidated, and this could be
Right.
a way to bring that back.
Right. The other thing is, if you're listening, you're probably thinking, man, Melson, it sounds like they're giving them everything they asked for. That's like the backroom deal is the way to go. Well, the issue with the backroom deal is that's what they get in year 1. There is nothing for years 2 and 3. So, it's $2,500 for public employees in year 1. They're asking for $7,500. So they get everything they're asking for in year 1. They get nothing in years 2 and 3. Teachers are asking for $10,000. They get $5,000 in year 1, but nothing in years 2 and 3. So,
Is any of that 922 revenue recurring though? I mean, wouldn't they have enough to?
Yeah, it's all recurring.
Okay.
But you've got 670 million in new spending you got to fund every year.
Oh, that's true.
So you've got 300, so you could, you've got 300 million here, so you could get most of the way there for the second year. But you still have to
get another couple of thousand to teachers, and maybe 1,200 to support staff, and 2,500 to public employees.
And the thing is, you and I just spent that 300 million on the $180 million deficit and buying new textbooks.
Oh, right.
Right. That 300 million you got left to play with. You and I literally spent that in 30 seconds.
Right. So and that's how quick the money goes.
Right.
I mean, it's like any of us, right? Like you get a bonus or you get a pay raise, and your expenses tend to rise to meet your spending. So, as an example, I got my tax return recently, and it wasn't that much, but I think I got $1,200 or something back, right? So I got my tax return, and we were moving last week, and that money was quickly eaten up by having to pay a plumber to come fix a few things. I bought a new router for my internet, just a few things, and I was like, man, to me, getting $1,200 felt like I can eat out. I'm living high in the hog for like 2 or 3 months.
And it's gone.
And it's gone, right? Because life is expensive. And if you're paying for life and education for 700,000 students across the state, it gets really expensive in a hurry.
No, 100%. So, like I said, we'll throw some version up on the web, maybe this version. We're going to have an infographic too. But, I hope this has been a helpful, discussion to you guys listening, because it just, I know we threw out a lot of numbers and a lot of, percentages, but even kind of putting this spreadsheet together, like, is complicated. Like this is kind of to illustrate the point that Senator McCortney made, that is, even if you can get everybody to agree, it's complicated to find out where the money's going to go. And part of this is because we're so far in the hole, right? We're so far in the hole, and we're talking about, an ask from our public employees and our teachers that's $1.4 billion in new spending, on top of, the $1.5 billion to $2 billion that we're already down. So,
right.
That's what we're facing.
All right, that brings us to the end of this episode. Remember, you can connect with us on Twitter and Instagram at Let's Fix This OK. Scott is at SCMelson. I am at AndyOKC. Please feel free to tweet at us, hit us up with any questions, thoughts, feedback. We'd love to hear it. You can also like our Facebook page at facebook.com/letsfixthisok. Our website is letsfixthisok.org, and on there you can sign up for our newsletter, read our blog, find resources and details about upcoming events. Don't forget that next week is our first Capitol Day of the year, March 28th, 9 a.m. at the Capitol. Hope to see you there. Our podcast is edited and produced by Scott and me, and Let's Pod This is a member of the Mostly Harmless Media Network here in Oklahoma. Our theme music is generously provided by the Sugar Free All-Stars. Let's Fix This is a nonpartisan, non-profit organization who strives to educate and equip all Oklahomans to engage with their government. We encourage you to get involved in any way that you can. And remember, decisions are made by those who show up. We hope that you'll join us. Have a great week.